order, with no country or group of countries dominating. However, the issue that we will be discussing today is when drawing from these different and diverse worldviews and experiences from BRICS members, will we manage to successfully and to the benefit of all create an interconnected existence? Will we be successful in doing exactly that? It is my honor then to request our Deputy Director General Professional Support Services, Dr. Botshabelo Marja, to officially welcome everybody to the event and say a few of the words. Thank you, Dr. Marja.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, everyone. My role is a simple one, to welcome you and then to sit back like all of you and enjoy the inputs and presentations from our colleagues this morning. We have guests from both within government, the state, from the National School of Government itself, Human Sciences Research Council, and we've also invited a number of scholars from various higher education institutions in South Africa. So we hope to have a very vibrant symposium to benefit from different views and engagements. There are three objectives in this symposium that we hope to talk to. The main thrust of the conversation is around the notion of pluriversalism coming out of BRICS, as the program director just indicated, which we now refer to as BRICS Plus. What kind of pluriversalism is it introducing, and how are we able to engage and benefit from that notion socioeconomically as South Africa? So that's objective number one. But also secondly, how can we be able, especially as South Africans, to harvest knowledge from BRICS Plus and this notion that it is bringing upon all of us, such that we are able to see not only growth in our country, South Africa, but also growth that takes advantage of the new world order. So that's the second objective. Thirdly, we are keen to have a conversation triggered also through this symposium on what does BRICS Plus and this notion of pluriversalism mean for us as South Africans. Personally, I am worried, and maybe that's part of the conversation we will have this morning. I am not sure how much as South Africans over the last 13 or so years of being founding members of BRICS, I am not sure how much have we as South Africa taken advantage of what BRICS, as originally founded, provides for. I am suspecting that we could have taken more advantage of BRICS, but I am now even more worried with BRICS Plus and whether in 10 years to come, these new member states that will be part of BRICS from January next year will and or might benefit from this space more than us. But we are not victims as South Africans on this path. We are masters of our own destiny. Part of this symposium is to trigger a conversation amongst us such that we can hopefully revert back to these fora such as BRICS that we are members of and harvest as much as we can from our membership for the betterment of our society, for the achievement of our own goals as South Africans, but also for the development of our own people. I hope that today, as we have this conversation, all of us here are able to benefit, go back to our respective institutions, look at ways in which the knowledge gained, the information shared, can be built into our own respective interventions in the different spaces and the positions of power that we occupy. Sit back, relax, and hopefully enjoy this conversation. We will be with you throughout this journey until around midday today. Welcome and all the best. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Maja. That's really quite a few words that is food for thought in our road ahead. I would like to introduce now the first speaker. The first speaker, of course, today is Professor David Monyane. Now, Professor David Monyane is a well-known international relations expert and foreign policy expert. He is an associate professor of Political Science and International Relations in the Faculty of Humanities at the University of Johannesburg, and he's also director of the Center for Africa-China Studies. He holds a PhD in International Relations from the University of the Witwatersrand. He has previously served as Senior Manager, International Relations Policy Analysis at the South African Parliament, and he also served as Policy Analyst and at the Development Bank of South Africa, where he did extensive research on regional economic communities, quite an important topic within the context, of course, of trade on our continent. He also participated or formed part of South African delegations in the former IPSA, India, Brazil, South Africa, a dialogue forum, and he also attended a number of BRIC summits in various countries. Dr. Monyane, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you, sir, and we're looking forward to listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Good morning to you all. I am honored to be asked to speak this morning. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers and all those who are listening. My starting point, I think the previous speaker has touched on key issues. The bigger question we have is BRICS and BRICS Plus. What does it mean in an ever-changing global order? My first opening kind of understanding is perhaps for us to go back to Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, who once said that and this was in the mid-40s, immediately after the Second World War, that the old is dying and the new is not yet born. We are caught between this situation where the post-1945 world order, no doubt, it is gradually dying. If you see what's happening in the world, within international institutions of global governance, whether it's the United Nations Security Council, you look at UN agencies, you look at WTO, IMF, World Bank, you look at conflicts, whether it's in Ukraine, the Middle East, South China Seas, and including our own continent. You will notice a number of things, that the will of the dominant powers is no longer as strong as it used to be. The United States, Western countries are not as dominant. They're powerful, yet unable to do what they want. And therefore, there's a rise of others. There's a rise of the previously so-called third world. I think in the post-Cold War, we had a situation in which United States and Western powers, their dominance and influence meant that they dictate to the world in terms of policy, market-driven development, economic structural adjustment programs across our African, the continent of ours. And these issues in all continents, it's increasingly being challenged by developing world. And the challenge and the battle over what the world should be, I think South Africa is well placed and has been playing a critical role in its own way, that we need a multilateral world order where there are different pillars, centers of power. We need to democratize the international system. Since 1994, I think there's been the cry from Pretoria. We need to ensure there's a fair play, there's a fair trade, and there's also an understanding that there is no one civilization. There are multiplicity of civilizations, and each and every civilization in the world has something to contribute to the development of people all over the world. And in a nutshell, within universities, I think whether Rhodes Must Fall, 2014, 2015, the whole talk about a decolonized knowledge system, I think it hasn't just ended. I mean, we saw it cutting across into UK, United States, the rise of minorities, demanding that a colonial way of looking at the world should come to an end. And therefore, there is that demand of us unlearning some of this colonial world order we have had for many years. So I think that wave, Me Too movements, and others, minorities, whether in Canada, I think we've had, United States, and other parts of the world. I think what we're seeing at the state level, a demand, so the rise of BRICS is just but one of those changes that are taking place in the world. And this, perhaps, the recent summit in South Africa was one of the most, in my own view, important event since 1945. In a way that, for the very first time, I think we've seen the power of the most powerful countries and their influence has been openly challenged. Challenged in the sense that since 1945 up to the end of Cold War, 1990s, we have had a one-way, a monolithic way of looking at the world, the norms and values, Western economic policies shaped and directed from a Western perspective. In the entire system and international relation, as we know, very Western biased. And you have to look what's happening. You tune on CNN or any other Western channels, you really see what I'm trying to get at, particularly when they analyze what's happening in Ukraine or Middle East. So what BRICS did, and the most fundamental changes that have taken, that shows the fragmentation of the global order, is the addition of new members to BRICS. And this is nothing new. We had a group of 77 plus China in the late 60s, 70s. I think we had the Bandung Conference of 1955, where Asian countries and African countries in 1955 agreed that the world that they were in was unfair. They need to decolonize that world to ensure that the so-called third world countries have an impact in the United Nations. involvement in Security Council, the demands that were made in 1955 were all about transfer of technology, knowledge from the developed countries, end of colonialism and imperialism, end of racism in the world then. And we moved to non-alignment movement by 1961, and the demand by these countries in a Cold War era, a need of a fair, denuclearized world order. But with the end of Cold War, I think it worsened the situation where the United States perceived, and wrongly so, with the Fukuyama and all other authors in the Western world, that was the end of history. There is no any other knowledge other than the Western knowledge. There is no any ideology other than the liberal order, and others are dead, and therefore that's the end of history. I think that kind of thinking has been open and challenged. We see the rise of China and others, India, Brazil, on the African continent, South Africa itself and others, as well as Russia. The addition of new BRICS members, namely Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Ethiopia, my own view that perhaps it would have been Nigeria, but I don't know the reason why, as well as Egypt and Argentina, with all challenges in Argentina, with the right-wing government that just came into power, somehow has brought us to a sharp, direct challenge to the current US-led hegemonic order. In what ways? And the changes that we see on a daily basis is that if you look at core issues, market level, the raw materials, whether you look at our own minerals, prices are not that dictated from the people, minority countries. You have countries in Europe and others that put price on products that they don't have. When it comes to oil, for instance, and OPEC, prices were much more dictated, and the movement of these markets from the developed countries. Very biased, where price of coffee, for instance, with bulk of coffee coming from Africa, or chocolate, cocoa price from the developed. These things are starting to change. I think you're seeing with the rise of China and with the BRICS Plus, the bulk of OPEC members are now members of BRICS. So what it means going forward, as COP28 is taking place in UAE as we speak, we're going to see a highly contested way where the developed countries will assert their views, will assert their way of developing, and price as well. So the balance of power in the world we live is constantly changing. The other change has to do with technology, that in the previous era, technology was dictated from the very same developed countries. Now we see the rise of other countries and technologies, which is becoming a huge issue. So it is in this context that the core question, due to limitation of time, I'll just limit and zoom into what to be done. Where are we as a country, as a continent? What role are we playing? What should we be doing? I think we need to move away from a fear factor. There's that fear factor. The fear factor is that we're going to be drowned in the new BRICS Plus. I think that view is coming from Western countries. South Africa is not really, shouldn't be a BRIC member. South Africa should forget about that, given the issues that we confront. So I think what we need to ask is that the population-wise, 62 million people, yeah, it's a respectable figure, but in itself won't have an impact. I think South Africa needs to continue doing what it can within SADC and at the continental level. With 1.4 billion people, I think 1.3 billion people, I think we'll be able to negotiate with the free trade agreement that has been signed, enter into agreements with other members, whether in BRICS or the developed countries. We need to champion knowledge and knowledge-centered. I think the core issue is the phase we're moving in from the third industrial revolution into the fourth industrial revolution. I think for me, and to also be critical, is that the problem we've been having is for us to allow the international community using South Africa as a dormitory base, where yes, we need investors, yes, we need quite a number of things, but you find that we play no critical role. We don't have vehicles, South African vehicles. I mean, we have developed arms, but I don't understand why we don't have tractors. South Africa built tractors. We don't have massive panels. I know there's a lot of things happening in a number of areas, but the sad part is that most of what is breakthroughs, technological breakthroughs made in South Africa, end up not registered here. They end up being registered outside the country. I think there is a need to have policy to ensure that we harness what we have, we use the knowledge we have, add our own traditional knowledge system, and coordinate with other countries, other universities, other centers of knowledge, but with the main aim of understanding that we need to leverage our knowledge and knowledge economy. We need to be players. We need to move away from a perspective of rule receivers, because at the moment we've been rule receivers. We run with things, whether it's climate change, we tend to be more Catholic than the Pope, without a clear understanding that countries such as China, they are transforming with an understanding of their domestic situation. They move from fossil fuel to clean energy at their pace. Secondly, they do it in a way that they're developing these new technologies that are Chinese made and for Chinese, as well as compete at the global level. In our case, we are dependent on external technologies, and we're in the forefront of making some of these changes and champion of climate change, of which we should, but we need to do it in a very smart way that we move with others. We look at what Brazil is doing, we look at what Russia, what India is doing, China is doing, and these new countries that have joined BRICS, UAE. My recent visit to UAE fascinates me that they're using knowledge, a very tiny country, desert country. It's now planting in UAE, in my recent visit, that they're having safaris. Imagine a safari in a desert. They're literally buying animals from us, putting them in that desert. They're having trees, they're planting, they're changing their environment. And if I'm not mistaken, more visitors are visiting UAE and Safari Desert than Kruger National Park. We need to ask the question that we are together with these big BRICS plus countries, but we also compete with them, whether it's Brazil, whether it's China, whether it's Russia. We are also competing with them, and we're moving in a world where there's multiplicity of civilizations. And the bigger question is, are we centering our own civilization, African way of doing things, as knowledge system to turn around, and as government officials, government people, how best do we deliver service delivery to our people in a more efficient way, learning from others, fulfilling the government's agenda of a developmental state, do it in a way that it is people-centered, not just market-centered, as always been the case. So I'll end by saying BRICS Plus, it's a great advantage, but let us move away from a fear factor, scared of the others. We cannot continue doing business as usual. Yes, our economy is integrated in the Western world to an extent that it limits our movements, but we need to strike and move and balance. The Western world is too important to South Africa. Different governance systems are important, but we need to infuse our own knowledge into the system for the betterment of our people, and learning from new countries and look at how they are investing in their knowledge in their centers of knowledge, technological hubs, and how they're coordinating their knowledge so that we do it in a way that benefits the country. So that the question that has been posed, are we taking advantage of BRICS? Are we taking advantage of any other forum that we are in? I think the more we do that, the better. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Professor. I really think your inputs were very valuable, giving us an overview of global trends, but drilling down right into the value that it has for us as a country. So thank you so much for your valuable inputs and sharing your great insights on the matter with us. Colleagues, it is my honor now to present to you the next speaker. The next speaker is the principal of the National School of Government, Professor Busani Ngawene. He will be talking on the pluriversal concept amongst BRICS countries. Professor Ngawene, of course, is somebody that has traveled to China quite often, and he's got a very good insight into BRICS matters, as well as into relationships between countries, specifically within the knowledge economy also. Thank you so much, Professor Ngawene, for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Good morning to you, Program Director, and good morning to Prof. Monyai, as well as all the other colleagues who are here, the guests, those who are speaking and engaging, as well as those who are attending. It is good that we are having this conversation. Today is the 1st of December, which is called the World AIDS Day. It's a very important, day for us in South Africa and for many communities globally. And of course, there are activities and events that are happening across the world and here in South Africa as well. Now, I make reference to it because it is acknowledged that in the early to mid 2000, in this century, there was a pandemic of HIV and AIDS, which was ravaging communities, causing havoc in South Africa. And as it is now, we still have many people who are now young adults who grew up without parents as a result of what that pandemic did. And it is understood globally that South Africa stands as an example of a country that could mobilize locally and internationally to effectively respond to a pandemic of HIV and AIDS. And that in doing so, the fight against the pandemic was driven by evidence, which is about knowledge generated by scholars and also in practice. And this evidence was both local as well as international evidence. So in a way, this pandemic response was driven by the embrace of knowledge and knowledge systems of South Africa, domestic as well as the international community. And that's the constellation of all that was understood about the virus, including its social determinant is what shaped the response by government, and that the successes that people talk about today are a consequence of that response, which was informed or was driven by evidence, evidence being the embrace of knowledge systems that were generated locally as well as internationally. So this stands as one of those good examples of how the state in particular can embrace the concept of pluriversalism and use it to respond to challenges confronting society. And in this instance, pluriversalism means the ability to embrace and appreciate various knowledge systems and cultures, take the best out of those that is suitable to your own circumstances, and apply it to respond to the challenges that you are facing. Of course, pluriversalism is a counter to the notion of universality. Universalism is an idea propounded by Euro-American institutions, which argues that that which comes from the global north is universal and therefore must be applied across the world, including in the global south, which means even in searching for solutions of human development and economic growth, we have to look at the global north and then respond, because we take that which is said to be universal. When we look at these countries that are in BRICS, the current as well as the ones that are joining next year, some of those countries have succeeded because they were able to embrace these knowledge systems, these cultures from their own countries, from their neighbors, as well as from the international community. Because there are ideas everywhere in the world, and those ideas can shape our responses to challenges facing society. So a few years ago, speaking at a BRICS conference, I made a proposition that BRICS should be seen as one of a intervention in the cause of promoting pluriversalism as a counter to universalism, wherein we take all of these countries and that which these countries have and have produced, their histories and their plans for the future, and try and build a shared, a future for humankind. Of course, colleagues, there are contradictions always in national and international development endeavors. And these contradictions, for example, will come to bear because even amongst ourselves as BRICS countries, with Brazil, for example, it's very difficult for South Africa to sell its wine in Brazil because Brazil is protecting the market there for Mercosur, which is the neighboring countries there. And it is understandable, whilst we want to have unlimited access to the Brazilian market to sell wine, but Brazil also has its own neighbors who are producing wine, one of them being Argentina. And so they will restrict our, export of wine into that country because they are trying to, open up or have a greater share for their neighboring countries. But that doesn't mean that South Africa cannot have a viable relationship with Brazil as it currently exists. So that is a contradiction, but that contradiction is being managed. There are contradictions, in the sense that Russia is part of BRICS. Russia doesn't buy as much from us as China and other countries are buying, but that doesn't mean that we cannot then have them in a viable relationship with them in the context of BRICS. That doesn't mean that there is nothing to learn, from them. Some people are arguing that the reason why the conflict has persisted to the extent that it has in Europe is because Russia is energy sufficient and is also food sufficient. And as a result, therefore, the conflict can persist for as long as it has. There are things to learn from us in that regard. How does a country reach a state of food sufficiency as well as energy sufficiency? Of course, with the energy, they've got gas, and so they are endowed with those natural resources. But from a food supply point of view, how do we, and there's something that needs to be understood about it, just as much as we must learn from how Brazil, when it was decided that they will move into the biofuels space, and South Africa was following very closely, but Brazil was able to actually increase the share of biofuels into their, automobile sector much faster than anyone else, and they use biofuels more than they use, other fossils to propel their vehicles. There is something to learn from them. Now, Prof. Monyae is talking about how the forthcoming member, like how UAE, for example, is turning the desert into a safari. We know of great cities that are being built in Saudi. Of course, they've got much bigger resources than we have. We know of urban development interventions that are happening in Ethiopia. We know about Egypt, and of course, China as well. So in a sense, each of these countries, there are unique features, unique characteristics, unique knowledge systems that if we, as bureaucrats in particular, understood what drives these countries, if we understood how India is able to maintain the rate of growth that it is maintaining, then even ourselves in South Africa, we may do things differently. There is one driver, by the way, of some of these developments in countries like India and China, and it has produced sufficient knowledge that we can turn into policy instrument and implement here in South Africa. In fact, not that we don't know about it, but in this instance, there is overwhelming evidence now that it is essential to do it. And that is the mobilization of all productive forces, and in particular, harnessing human capital development. So in these countries like, India and China, by doubling of vocational education, by doubling investment in science and technology, education, and in R&D, we now see these revolutions that are taking place in those societies. Some of you may be aware that the India Institute of Technology in India is the biggest supplier of executives into the top 100 technology firms in the world. And we now know those investments and the extent to which they've turned around the economic fortunes of India. We know how they are entering the space very rapidly, of producing high quality products, including in automobiles and so on, just as China has been doing. So it is important, therefore, colleagues, that we must appreciate we cannot, as countries, trade better with each other unless we fully appreciate each other's national systems of decision making, systems of trade, systems of customs, and systems of cultural production. Public servants in any sphere who do not know how their neighboring countries' knowledge systems work will struggle to make any inroads, and we end up becoming frustrated as if people are not cooperating, when in fact it's because we haven't really studied and understood their system. Because what we need is to understand, build on them, and harness those systems. And finally, as it has been stated now, economies of the world today are driven by knowledge. As I said, if you know about a country, if we know better about each other as BRICS, we'll be able to trade better, we'll be able to relate better, and will increase the amount of human capital or of human conduct as well. economies are driven by, knowledge, in a sense that we, as I said, we know that if you double investment in, vocational education, in the science and technology education, as well as in R&D, there will be impact on a broader economy, because you can then move into a phase of high quality growth and produce high value added products, which are a challenge at the moment, because some of our economies are still relying on primary products. So government officials, as people who are interacting and engaging with their counterparts across borders, need to be the ones who understand fully this idea of pluriversalism, that we learn from others, we take the best out of it, and we produce a local response that is appropriate and responsive to the circumstances that we face. And that in relating to others, we must know that we must not be arrogant to believe that which we know or that which we have done as South Africa must now then become universal because we have a low opinion of other people. Mutual respect does matter in this regard. The manner in which we behave and respond to our partners outside of our own borders is exactly the same way we should relate to our citizens as well. When I was in Singapore a few years ago, I learned there that Batupile, which in our case is a lengthy statement, in Batupile in Singapore is a statement that says, will you treat your mother the same way? And everybody in the public sector has to answer that question. If you were a diplomat, your mother needed consular services, will you treat your mother the same way? If you were a doctor in a clinic and there's a sick lady, the manner in which you treat that person is the same way that you will treat your own mother. If you work in a bank and you're providing finance for small businesses or loans for higher education and so on, we have to answer that question, because then it provokes you and pricks your conscience to rethink how you relate to people in your own country, in your own domestic environment, but also how you relate and treat other people outside as well. So thank you very much once again for inviting me to this. Let's continue to pursue this idea of pluriversalism. Other people are learning from us. We also should learn from them and produce our own local responses. From such knowing of others and them knowing of us and the best that we can all put on the table, we will be able to build a better and a safer world. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you so much, Professor Ngobeni, for the insights and understanding. And I think what is specifically of note is the pragmatic approach in terms of acknowledging that we all differ and that we come from various paradigms, but that it's important that we cooperate widely where we can, and that we build on our strong points. And this means strong points in international relations, economic development, and specifically of relevance for us is the knowledge economy and knowledge development and sharing. So thank you so much for your inputs and your support for this activity. We really appreciate. Colleagues, it's my honor now to introduce to you Dr. Funeka Yasini April from the Human Sciences Research Council, and she will inform us on the role of research and development in policy spaces of BRICS. Dr. April's research expertise lies in industrialization with a focus on mining and special economic zones. She has recently expanded her work also from minerals into the energy industrial complex with an issue or with a focus on issues such as value chains, economic clusters, manufacturing, and social inclusion. Quite a wide scope. During the last few years, she has implemented various projects on just energy transition, also very important for the events that are taking place at the COP summit as we speak here. She has also worked a lot on SMEs and manufacturing. So these are really important projects within the South African context, but she's also worked on local mining communities aligning it with local economic development, and of course aligning that with instruments within the integrated development plan. She has participated in projects from the CSIR, the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, specifically on impacts of socioeconomic conditions and other matters relating to living conditions in the South African mining industry. And quite important, of course, for the purposes of today, she did a study which was on the request of the Chinese government on China's international best practices, lessons for South Africa. And the notion was here to see if to examine if China's economic reforms has got relevance for South Africa, and to what extent practical cooperation could be promoted between South Africa and China. With that, Dr. April, we are looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
I want to thank the organizers of this event. It's quite an honor and a pleasure to be here today. I acknowledge some of the colleagues that I know quite well, Professor Mweni, Professor Munai, Professor Putreta, who is a tough master, and ensure that I'm here today. So I want to say thank you again, and also on behalf of the Human Science Research Council, we want to thank this collaboration to participate on this event today.
Kindly go to full screen mode, please.
Sure, let me see now, full panel. Okay. Thank you very much for reminding me. I was asked to do this presentation about 2 weeks ago, but we had a conference on the issue of energy, which is also inclusive of the BRICS countries, with Parliament last week. So it was actually late last week. So this week, when I now went through the material, I literally started reading up on this whole issue of the role of research and development in policy spaces of BRICS. I started reading on this like 2 or 3 days ago. So especially in regards to Professor Ngaweni's pluriversal theory. I'd actually not come across this theory before. So I spent the first 2 days this week trying to understand where he was coming from, and I went and got the definitions of it so that I can apply it to the presentation. My expertise is more on industrialization research. Knowledge production is something I did a while back. So I had to try and conceptualize this as to what this pluriverse thing is all about, and what it really means. And I realized reading through it that there are so many various definitions of this pluriverse theory. You have the decolonial aspect of it. There are different ways of looking at it. But I decided to go with Professor Ngaweni's aspect, where he refers to Arturo Escobar on how it refers on its relevance to us being in a more inclusive society, a more potential, therefore, of increasing countries' ability to have a more just and humane progressive future. And Professor Ngaweni also, I read through some of his I read that paper that you wrote on the pluriversal world and how you apply it. Basically the success of this, from what I understood when I read his article, was that it has the potential to alter the global economy and lift millions out of poverty. That's what I basically read out of his article, that pluriversal can actually create an opportunity, a better opportunity for a common future of shared prosperity, basically. So I argue that this theory that he has propositioned is really relevant in today's world. Though we have a lot of developing economies that have emerged, there's still that need to try and come up with a global aspect of how are we going to do this versus individual. And I think Dr. Munai, Professor Munai also referred to this, that we still need to be working with SADC and other regions in order to promote this level of pluriversalism to some degree. And it also obviously goes to the theory of the multipolar worlds that I will not go to today. Now, in applying the pluriversal theory, the question for me that rose up was whether we can lift millions out of poverty through education and knowledge production, because the topic I was given had to deal with knowledge production. And I find it to be a very pertinent question. And my answer after going through all this the past few days was that yes, it can be done, but it can only be done through a massive research skills development industry that we need to do as South Africa in collaboration with some of the big countries. And if we look at China's economic miracle that we keep talking about, actually, interestingly enough, it is, as we all know, with their special economic zones, it has been based on your low-skilled labor of intensive manufacturing, which is a boat that we have missed in South Africa. We did have a strong manufacturing base, and 2008 dealt with our strong manufacturing base, where we started to deindustrialize. And we've gone more into services, which leaves out these masses, these millions of masses that actually need to be part of this pluralist economy. And here I have your indicators of the growth. It's a growth comparative in terms of development indicators, in terms of manufacturing. And you'll see there with South Africa, where we are, South Africa is in the purple, and you'll see that 2000 to 2003 we were doing quite well. 2004 to 2007 we did extremely well, but 2008 you can see that we literally went to don't want to say zero, but our manufacturing capacity went down with that global issue that happened. And then 2012 to 2014, we come back up. But it's interesting to see a country like Egypt, which is just joined BRICS, as to how they have managed to rise up. And I suspect that one of the reasons why countries like Egypt and Ethiopia were selected versus Nigeria, Prof. Munai, is because of their infrastructure growth and their ability to be part of the global value chain. So this is something that we need to address when we talk about education and knowledge. So the first speaker basically gave us the symposium objectives, and he announced the 3 objectives. So I've decided that I will, and according to the letter that I read, we're supposed to deal with these 3. So I will answer, I think I'll be able to, due to time, I'll just answer these 2. And the first one actually really speaks to number 2, which is how can we harvest knowledge from the BRICS member states to support South Africa's socio-economic development, and how can BRICS contribute to South Africa's knowledge economy. I did some background research yesterday to look at the BRICS knowledge economy, and I think most of us are aware already that it's really done very well. to date now in terms of education at the higher.
Sorry, Dr. April, you're breaking up. I don't know if the connection is lost, Ms. Field.
Yes, Prof. I think we've lost her.
Okay, let's just, colleagues, if we can just wait a minute or two for Dr. April to see if we can get her back online. If not, we would have to continue with the program and request her to talk again when she's back online. Thank you. Right, Ms. Field, there's no sign of Dr. April. Ah, Dr. April, welcome, welcome, welcome.
I'm really sorry about that. I guess I need to share the screen again.
Dr. April, you're welcome to stop your video share because I think your signal might be a bit low, so you can disable. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So I was just discussing that basically there's been a lot, given the number of years that the BRICS projects and things have been implemented, a lot has happened. 2021, we see the BRICS Space Agency signing this agreement on cooperation on this BRICS remote sensing satellite constellation, which is really another good scientific thing. And then we also know that now there's also the BRICS. I think it was just established a virtual medical trace section also that was done. There's been a lot that has been happening. And they're all wonderful initiatives. But my question though, going back to Professor Wisani's theory is, are they pluvialist in supporting education to move millions out of poverty? And I personally believe that the BRICS knowledge production agenda has been very elitist, in a sense that it's only speaking to you and I. It's speaking to your professors, your doctors, your academics, your BRICS business councils. And I'm not sure that it's really functioning to alter poverty through education as it should. Which goes back to what the first speaker said. Have we really strategically taken advantage of BRICS as we should have over the past years? From a South African perspective, I believe that the current BRICS knowledge production structure leaves out the masses who need it the most. And who are these masses? The masses are the millions of unemployable matriculants affected by poverty, as they are not listed in the aforementioned list of education initiatives that I just discussed. To date now, about 1 million, a whole million South Africans write matric exams every year, but only about 150 pass at a level that is acceptable to universities. That's the article that I actually saw last night as I was preparing for this presentation. It's in Mail and Guardian. So then it begs the question, what becomes of all the school leavers who don't go to university? And I remember meeting Floyd, having a discussion with Floyd Shivambu at the Lutuli House some 15 years ago. And he was saying to me, the challenge that we have is, what are we going to do with those millions out there who are not part of the system? What are we going to do with these people who cannot become part of the society as they should? And this was 15 years ago, when things were still good. So I wonder now. And so I think that we have really not been successful in making the BRICS educational agenda more inclusive as we could have, because these are countries that are also emerging, but have managed to make sure that their people are part of their system. And have we taken advantage of that? Look at our, and when we talk about graduate unemployment, which is also a problem currently, it should make us ponder on those without those higher education qualifications, which are much greater, which are far greater. And by the way, we should also not forget those dropouts. We have a large number of dropouts, from like 50 to 60% that don't make it, meaning that about half of these people that started even from basic elementary don't even make it to we're not even counting them in those millions who don't make it after matric. And so by estimates, according to this Human Resource Development Council, and again, forgive me, like I said, I just started doing this research like 2-3 days ago. And I really, with more time, I think it would have been a very interesting subject, actually. There are about as many as 20 million South Africans that remain on the margins of formal employment. And a lot of them face permanent unemployment. Now, this study was done in 2019 before the latest stats essay results. So had I had time, I would have wanted to go through the stats essay to see where we are with this aspect. And I want to, mine is not to come to today and bash the government. They've actually done quite a lot when it comes to education. Investing in education has not been the problem in South Africa. We've done quite a bit. But the strategy of doing it, I mean, over the last two decades, a lot of our youth have been just warehoused in these initiatives of learnerships and internships and these employment schemes, which have actually not been as had a significant impact as they should. And I'll quickly just say, we all know part of the reason. We know it's the apartheid history that we have, and so which the government is still grappling with. Then there's the issue of CETA. And maybe we do need to do a BRICS collaboration research-driven process to examine our CETA component, which is designed to increase the employability of the poorest and most educationally disadvantaged South Africans, to see how can we maybe, what are the CETA processes that are done in other BRICS countries to deal with this, to address our weak link here. Maybe something that we should look at and investigate. And also our outdated education. We have no excuse for that. Countries like China, they specialize on industrial workforces. This is what they do. Countries like India, this is like their bread and butter, creating industrial workforces. So why have we not leveraged on this to try and also create industrialized education? Earlier, and I'll give an example. We went to Lephalale, which is a coal-driven community by Exxaro. It's the main mine there, and it has these 2 Eskom plants. So we talked to the COSATU union there. And they told us clearly, you know, we've done our research on this. We see how Brazil has done a good job in balancing its renewables and its coal and all of that. And by the way, interestingly, all your BRICS countries, the top 5 top producers of coal actually in the world, when we're talking about this whole just transition thing. So they've done this work, and they're saying to us, the problem we're having is that though government is talking about this just transition into hydrogen and renewable energy, our syllabus at the TVET college is not being redesigned to address that, whether it's on solar energy and all of that, which goes to the issue of the industrial education, which is what they were really trying to say. And it also goes to the another, and I felt that, and I was very happy to hear Kosatu talking about the TVETs, because it's a conversation we need to have. I mean, the university cannot house everybody. In 2021, according to Naidu in the Mail and Guardian, there are only 127 places available for new students. And if you look at the same diagram, which was from Edim Naidu's picture that I saw yesterday, you'll see that in 2021, there were 127 university places, spots, but you had 896 candidates, metric candidates, part-time and full-time, that were trying to go to the same university. There's no space to deal with this. But when you look at our counterparts, they have managed to ensure that they bridge that gap. And again, I want to say that we need to examine. I didn't have time to do a thorough examination to look at what India does, what does Brazil do, because Brazil used to be one of the most unequal societies. So it'd be interesting to find out what kind of TVET system did they implement. I know they've been good with the SME aspect, and was that part of their TVET system? It will be interesting. We know all the challenges. I'm not going to go into that. But all I'm going to say is we need to increase the ratio of TVET college students and make sure that they are geared as South Africa's future industrial workforce, which is consistent with other economies such as like China and Brazil. And we also need to change the image and make our TVETs competitive. We have the ability to do this. And because if we don't do this, it impacts also on our limited skilled labor that we have already currently. And the fact is, when our SETAs fail to deliver, it impacts our industry, our national government, our local government in a way that has significant ramifications. Let me not even go far. In Gauteng, how many bureaucrats running Gauteng have the required skills that they need to run it for the kind of province that it is? That's a key. Those are key things we need to really be working towards when we talk about this pluviris theory. How are we going to do this? And I'm going to say I have to look at Park Tau's mayorship and ask, are we here from what we heard with Park Tau? And these are questions that we need to ask. Skills again. I was reading again because I did most of last night. I discovered so much information. A year ago, 2021, Clover. There was an article by Penelope Maseko that Clover is closing South Africa's largest cheese factory due to this issue of skills in service delivery. And a large part of it was water. I mean, electricity was the second, but the issue of water service was an issue. And then, but we should bear in mind that it's not just Clover. There are many other companies that are talking the same talk, which then affects our issue of job creation and employability and all those things for us to be as competitive as our BRICS partners. And so then, interestingly enough, there were reopening prospects when I kept digging further last night. Last year, that the Northwest Provincial Government, Premier Bushi and them, they wanted Clover to give them 15 million so that now the provincial government should own this Clover milk factory. The question was, do we have the skills? Does the provincial government have the skills to be able to do that? So I argue that in order for us to really apply pluralism effectively, we also need to get our house in order for the BRICS skilling to work in SA. We cannot call people from outside to come and assist us to scale, and yet now we don't have our house in order. These ladies that you see in this picture, they all lost their jobs, these ones here. due to our lack of skills. So what can BRICS contribute to South Africa, which is the second question in terms of the knowledge economy? And I argue that there is a need for socially engaged research, radical approaches to community research. We should do the theory, but we should mix it with the applied more and more. It's so urgent that we do that. And the BRICS education research agenda should not just be about you and me when we go to these academic events and chit chat and all, but it needs to transcend into the technicist analysis of formal education. We have to go there. And I'm so glad the first speaker raised this issue of the BRICS Plus. We did not take advantage of the BRICS countries to improve on our skills as we could have. So now what does it mean? How are we going to do this with these other plus countries? I hear what my brother, Professor Munai, is saying, that there shouldn't be a fear factor. But I won't lie to you. Talking to some of my other colleagues, the fear factor is there. Because at the end of the day, firstly, some of the views I've gathered is that this has happened, the BRICS Plus happened because of China's main foreign policy interest, which is applicable. Now, if that's the case, what is South Africa's foreign policy interest and its agenda, especially in terms of pluralism, with adding these the BRICS Plus? Have we created a strategy? Because it seems the past 10, 15 years we haven't. I want to say that there has been,
Dr.
I'm wrapping up, sir.
Thank you.
There has been a way forward. The BRICS has been contributing in terms of the knowledge economy and research, as you saw with the Future Skills Challenge that we recently saw. And they had the skills that were done, drone technologies, etc. But then my question was, what was the criteria? Were the TVET students also involved in this? And way forward, I think we need to have a skills dialogue collaboration chat with BRICS. We look at BRICS nations currently, they produce more than half of the world's engineering graduates in each year. Whether it's ICT, Russia also has a high tertiary gross enrollment, and China is also seriously working on its workforce upskill, which is the core of its reform agenda that we also need to really look into. China also has this wonderful training model where it takes bureaucrats to go and train in China for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And maybe we could discuss training for TVETs or technical students to help upskill our millions that they come out of poverty through education and research. The fact is not everyone can travel, and South Africa should engage on an industry skills go-out workforce campaign with countries like India that could be hosted here in China. I'm not going to go too much into the model. And let me just go back to the fact that the skills is something that Ethiopia has mastered. How did we miss that aspect going forward? Sorry.
Sorry, Dr. April, we've lost you.
Prof, I think in the interest of time, maybe we should continue.
Okay, thank you. I thank you, Dr. April, very much for your inputs. I think it is of much relevance. Specifically, of course, the important information that post warnings relating to our industrial and economic growth trajectory, as well as, of course, the socioeconomic implications thereof. You provided excellent insights in the potential relevance of the pluriversal theory to BRICS, and this specifically pertained to broad-based education, research and development, and how we could contribute to building and developing a better future for all. But as you highlighted, we must do this as partners by sharing knowledge and expertise. Thank you so much. The next speaker then is Mr. Meshach Tulane Zwane, and he will be sharing with us a short conversation on exploiting opportunities presented by BRICS to develop South Africa's knowledge economy. Mr. Zwane is an experienced economist, and he's got a long history of working in economic research and policy analysis in government and in the private sector. He's got a master's degree in agricultural economy from the University of Pretoria. He's currently a senior economist in the Economic Policy and Planning Unit in the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs. He's responsible for conducting relevant research on economic policy development and analysis, modeling, and he also coordinates and undertakes strategic studies on key sectors within the provincial economy. Mr. Zwane have also worked as an economist at the Trade in Industrial Policy Strategy TIPS and as an economic analyst at the National Economic Development Department, EDD. So thank you very much, Mr. Zwane. Thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to listening to you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for inviting me to the session. Colleagues, I would like to apologize that I cannot share a video. I've already alluded to the host that I have a condition that I'm facing now. Yeah, so let me just upload the presentation. Share the screen. Okay. Colleagues, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet, yeah.
Okay. Let me just check. So, share.
You're sharing the wrong screen, sir. If you're having some difficulty, I'll flag it from my side.
Please. My screen just went blank now. What's going on?
You're welcome to go ahead. You'll indicate when I should change slides.
Yeah, my screen just went blank now. I don't know what happened. I just shared, then it's now like blank. What do I do?
We can see your slides this side. I think Ms. Field will move them on for you. Thank you, Mr. Zwane.
If your screen is black, you can just press the escape button.
Okay, I was trying to press it, but
Because I think it's probably trying to load your presentation, but if you can just open up your Zoom slide, you'll be able to see your presentation and you can continue.
yeah, it's actually blank. I can't even see anything. It's black now. Let me just take it. Okay. So while I'm just waiting for it, colleagues,
Do you have your presentation printed in front of you?
no, I think I have to switch it off and start.
Okay, it's fine. Maybe if we can go to the next presenter while you sort out your laptop, sir, will that be okay?
Ms. Field, if you stop sharing, are you sharing the screen now?
Yes, I am. Maybe we can move on to the next presenter while Mr. Zwane tries and sort out his laptop. Prof.
Right, colleagues, that means that we should go then to our next presenter. And the next presenter is somebody that has been engaging with us for quite a number of cases, and we are very glad to again rely on you, Professor Daisy Selematsela from the University of the Witwatersrand. Dr. Daisy, or Professor actually, may I request that you just briefly introduce yourself? I've not received biography from you, but we are really looking forward to listening to you on the implications for open access in the context of BRICS. Please, Professor Selematsela, if you okay to continue.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm just trying to share my slide here. I'm in a public space, so I'm just trying to share my slide here. So I shall be co-presenting with my colleague Lazarus Matizi-Rofa, and we are coming from the context of us being involved in the open access space. Let me just put it on play, on the open access space, and especially looking at the open science within the context of how do we deal with scholarly communication and e-scholarship. And that's where our focus has been. And I'm recently being appointed as the first vice president for the International Science Council, focusing on open data and open science, and that it's in the 57 years history of the International Science Council, and I was voted in by 56 countries. So for us, it's an achievement as a country through the Department of Science and Innovation, as the current chair of the Core Data National Committee, where we focus on open science and open access and open data. So that's our ambit, and Lazarus will focus more on especially the focus that we see happening between BRICS and us linking to the SDGs. We can't talk about BRICS and also the knowledge economy and what we contribute from our profession, especially as knowledge practitioners in knowledge management and information science, without highlighting the issues around how do we deal with the Sustainable Development Goals, and especially now, Professor Naweni, where every article that you publish, we need to be linking that to see where the SDGs metadata is, and then that's how the rankings are coming up now within the institutions. But we shall be sharing with that, and also we shall be sharing also on the open journals that we have that are then being located within us, within the BRICS areas, and that's what we'll be touching base on. So I'll just move quickly to the second slide. Why is it not moving now? Okay, sorry for that. Yes. So this is the SDGs as we know them. And for us, we are looking at open access and the 17 goals. And as we know that the 17 SDGs provide a call for action for us to create a sustainable environment for all of us. And it was adopted by 193 leaders. And I won't touch a lot on that. Then I'll move to the next slide. Oh. Thank you. We are aware that for us, when we look at open access in relation to SDGs, especially in the Global South, and linking to BRICS, what are we talking about? It's quite important to us that we must reflect on what our African leaders have done and have responded to the SDG agenda by setting up the regional priorities as part of the CAP, which is our Common Africa Position on the post-2015 development agenda, and later the 2063. And that's where we take our ambit from. And I just want to highlight that there is a close relationship between these agendas when we look at us within the Global South, linking to the BRICS communities, that for us, the 2063 agenda places prominence on research and innovation for sustainable development. And an important development in this aspect is the formulation of SDGs as it's being universally recognized as part of especially Goal 4 on quality education. That's what we'll focus on. And also the SDG targets in Goal 4 on education that are of particular relevance. For example, Prof. Naweni to Mr. Makwena there is the relevance of repositories, data stewards, libraries, and information specialists with the alignment of how do we ensure that Goal 3, which is about ensuring livelihoods and promoting well-being for all ages, is actually attested to with all the publications that we harvest and so forth. And Goal 4 on education targets, this challenge targets the following: the issues of who are the actual role players and who bears the responsibility on the complex and interrelated issues of accessible affordability of knowledge resources, and what information library services or knowledge management specialists have also to consider the appropriate application of the 4, for example, interrelated essential features that we need to be looking at when we look at Goal 4 on education that addresses items or narratives that are part of the Nations Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the CSCR, namely the 4 ambits that I just want to touch base with you: the issues around availability, accessibility, acceptability, and adaptability when we look at knowledge generation, and how do we link that to the knowledge economy for us. And for availability here, we're looking at the establishment of COPs that will ensure and facilitate information sharing, and that's what we are doing today: learning and cooperation in pursuit of practical, sustainable solutions for us in the BRICS area. Accessibility, we are looking at what's our role with regards to information literacy programs and ecological literacy if we want to address our SDGs in relation to what the BRICS are being, the narratives around the BRICS, the issues around acceptability. How are we making available open source academic journals, and especially the National School of Government? It's also looking at coming up with own publishing house, for example. Adaptability, how are we looking at the training of researchers, policymakers, citizen science aspects, and public outreach to support and ensure the application of knowledge in solving key global disaster health problems. And as we know in the BRICS areas, this impacts us a lot. And I just want to highlight the context when we look at the SDGs with knowledge issues and linking to the SDGs. You can see that, as you are aware, that we spend as a country an amount on research and development as a percentage of our GDP. Usually it was around 15% of our annual investment is in R&D for South Africa, and that amount comes from international partners. We also look at our qualitative measurements of use or access to our ICTs. These are our measures. How our ability to produce high export technology, also the higher education internationalization, and I think that's what the school is also looking towards. And here, when we look at higher education internationalization, we're looking at a process to actually integrate national, intercultural, and global dimension into all aspects of education. And we're looking to enhance the quality of education and research for all students and to make a meaningful contribution to society. That's what under higher education we're looking at. And we're also looking at these indicators where you look at the number of scientists in the country, the number of patents filed, and the number or impact of articles published in ranked or DHET impact journals. And when we look at the context again in the knowledge generation aspect, we look at what influences what we have to be looking at. It's the issue around the South African government transformation objectives, where we have that a session on a knowledge generation, influence, and knowledge society that compete globally. And this links to SDG 3 and SDG 4, and this influences our region where we are. The other aspect of knowledge generation, we look at the National Research and Development Strategy. We also look at the National Higher Plan, National Plan for Higher Education, the Human Resources Development Strategy, and we also look at the STEM 10-year innovation plan, which is still relevant as part of the Department of Science and Innovation. Then we look at the National Development Plan. The research funding framework is core to what we are discussing today also. And in particular of relevance to us as what we are presenting to you is also looking at the South African Open Science Policy that's in draft from the Department of Science and Innovation. And for us, the context is where does this take us when we look at knowledge generation linking to SDGs in the Global South, and in particular to BRICS? How do we then organize knowledge practitioners, Mr. Makwena, to better support the knowledge economy for sustainable development? How do we capture the outputs, for example, from the researchers from the school and communicate the value of data-driven practices within the Sustainable Development Goals? And having said that, I want Lazarus, my co-presenter, then to touch on issues around open science as an accelerator for Sustainable Development Goals within the BRICS areas. Lazarus, you can come in.
Thank you, Prof. So I think you just play my slides as we go through. And thank you, Chair, for giving us this opportunity, and also colleagues that are on this panel. I think from the university context, I think we are looking at open science more or less at a national perspective with regards to the direction that we have been channeled to look at open science as an enabler for all aspects of life in the country, and for, in particular, the National Advisory Council on Innovation, and which is part of the Ministry of Science and Technology. And for us to improve and sustain the quality of life of all South Africans, we can only do that through knowledge sharing, also develop human resources for science and technology, and build the economy and strengthen the country's competitiveness in the international sphere. Next slide, Daisy. Right. So if we look at the parameters of how open science has been transitioning in South Africa, we look at universities and also the work of the National Research Foundation, which has been driving part of the initiatives. For example, in the universities, I think most of the universities have taken on open science or open access, and also in particular our research councils have also joined in this drive, and others, national facility institutions, etc. So we are also encouraging and also working together with some of our government institutions, for example, our colleagues at the School of Governance, etc. Next slide, Daisy. Next slide. So with policies and practices and initiatives, I think these are the things that are impacting on research productivity and ensuring that, you know, we continue to look at open science from our own perspective, and also looking at open science from the global north, as well as from the BRICS partnerships. Next slide. From the BRICS open access ecosystem that I had a look at, this is a study that was done by one of our colleagues, Shukla, in 2021, where he says there are at least 400 repositories from BRICS countries which are registered on the open door, and of which 151 repositories are from Brazil. And out of those total of 400 repositories, 292 repositories have working home pages, multidisciplinary subject covered by a maximum of 232 repositories. So repositories are platforms that are open source based. In other words, when we put content in these spaces, anyone who has access to the internet will have access to the content. So in our context, in particular in South Africa and also globally, DSpace is a free open source platform where any organization that research based, they can actually curate any research or documentations that they wish to share with the public or with other stakeholders, and this will be freely available online, etc. So, and what we have taken out of this study is that English is the mostly used language for these repositories, and a maximum of 361 repositories are of an institutional type, and India is a maximum collection, followed by Brazil, and of which they have been curating mostly their journal articles and etc. So only 39 repositories provide policy support, and only 45 were updated in the year 2020. I think we need to look at that last statement where we are saying only 39 repositories provide policy support. So from a national perspective, I think this is where we are lacking as a country. If you go to the next slide, because most of our institutions that are policy-based don't have institutional repositories. So from the tables that are given in this study, we can actually see the number of or growth of repositories in the BRICS countries, and we can see that Brazil is leading with 151 repositories, because Brazil as a country, they have embraced open access at a policy level, and most of their institutions, including government institutions, also have repositories. Then we also see the high impact of repositories in India with 98, and that's and then we look at ourselves as a partner. We have 43. I think as a smaller country compared to the other countries, we are not fairly doing badly. But you will notice that most of these repositories are from higher education institutions and a few other research institutions. So in total, if we go to the next slide, the ones that are operational repositories, particularly as I have alluded, Brazil, Russia has 48, India 98, China 60, and us 43. So of the ones that are not, so you will see, I think because of lack of skills in the country, particularly in government institutions, you will notice some of the repositories were created of the 9 that are listed there, and they are no longer dominant or open working. But in the higher education sector, we do have repositories that have been which are working, because the universities are actually placing staff to manage those platforms. Next slide, please. So one of the interesting aspects of what I liked was the way this study looked at the subject covered in some of these repositories. And we'll notice, if we look at ourselves as South Africa, where we have 32, they are multidisciplinary, which means most of the subjects are covered. Then we also have social science. Probably when they picked social science, it could be the HSRC's repository, which is also registered on this platform. And obviously there are some which may humanities based, but we are lacking in some of the areas where we want to see the sciences, being dominant, because those are the critical areas where the interventions for, poverty, health, and other ailments in society are actually accruing. We don't just want to have, the academic repositories that speaks more on the academic research, but also to get repositories that speaks to societal problems. It could be at a municipality level or any other, interventions from NGOs, etc. Next slide, please. And one of the things, like I've mentioned, most of these softwares are free. And as
sorry,
you can
colleagues,
see,
may I please ask that you move towards wrapping up? Thank you very much.
okay. It's this space, which is easy. And I think what I can urge colleagues that are coming from institutions where you want support, us as universities, we are willing to support our colleagues who may want to use this space. In our institution here at WITS, we use this space, and quite a number of universities, of the 26 universities we have, they also use this space. Next slide, please. One thing which was of interest to me was I was quite happy to see that we do have one repository that is dedicated to a specific vernacular language, which is Southern Sotho. If you look on the South African site, and etc. But like we have said, a majority of these repositories are only in the language of the North, which is English. And I think that's where the cultural aspect of how knowledge is shared needs to be enhanced in terms of language and translation. It doesn't really matter to have a Sotho speaking repository, but with translations into other languages. I think that's where us as a country, we need to look and find a way of ensuring that we translate some of the content, particularly when you look at China. They have transcribed some of their content into English, etc., for the benefit of other countries. So if we look at the interdisciplinary aggregation and also from a governmental perspective of knowledge sharing, Brazil shows that they have quite a number of repositories that are government managed, and etc. In our context of South Africa, there is not one of any of our repositories that are managed from a knowledge production government institutions. For example, we would want to urge your school at the National Government of Governance School to actually have a repository. I think I can wrap here if there are more. So from the context that Professor Daisy spoke about, we are looking at open science basically on ensuring that we curate all the research outputs that comes of our institutions, and that's why the South African government is now ensured that we do have a national open science policy. We can go forward. And also we want to also have Creative Commons, etc. But one interesting aspect of the open science movement in South Africa is the work that the universities are doing, where the government has also sponsored the South African SDG Hub, which is hosted by the University of Pretoria, where it is harvesting content from all these repositories and specifically targeting content that can be used for policy analysis by government experts and workers, etc., for ensuring that content coming from the universities is applicable for use in government. We can skip. This is more technical. So that's the context of where this repository. So you can see this harvester is actually harnessing more than 38 repositories, both from South Africa and a few other African countries. But this is driven by the open access strategies of UNESCO. And you can see that diagram here, which speaks to the UNESCO's open science framework. Next slide, please. So what I'm asking for in the context of us, we need to ensure that all our libraries, where they be in government institutions or universities, we skill our colleagues and say that they are able to harness knowledge that is SDG appropriate, and also to ensure that knowledge is shared freely across all our sectors, etc. Because this is now doable with the open source repositories, as I mentioned. So in the universities, we now have developed our own journal systems, which are free to the public, and no one needs to have a subscription to use this content, etc. So I think that's the context I will leave. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, colleagues, for the important ideas and specifically the link between knowledge sharing and development. I think you highlighted the importance of open access, in fact, the crucial character of it, but we need to dovetail it with creating appropriate knowledge structures. While researchers must have access to existing knowledge, but they must also have the opportunities to contribute by sharing their own research. So thank you very much, colleagues. I just would like to ask Mr. Zwane, could you please continue? Are you available?
Yes, we can continue. Please,
thank you, Mr. Zwane.
Share my presentation. Once again, I would like to apologize, colleagues, for the inconvenience. The laptop just crashed. Yeah, so basically, because I think I have maybe less than 10 minutes to just sum up the presentation. So basically, we've been asked to look at exploiting opportunities from our BRICS member state in order for us to start building our own knowledge economy. So I'll just take you through maybe what I'm not going to touch all of them because of time, but I was literally asking questions so that I try and look for data or some indexes that support this question that I was looking at, because before you exploit or fully utilize, we must understand whether the entire BRICS trading bloc has fully transited to a knowledge economy, or are we all still struggling to get there? So going to look at whether is SA poised to reap the rewards of the knowledge economy. What can a knowledge economy deliver for our country? Also going to look at the pillars of the knowledge economy, as well as BRICS Knowledge Economy Index. Then we'll also look at the Global Innovation Index. And then lastly, we'll then, because this is a question that I wanted to ask from the previous speakers, that do we really have a knowledge creation opportunity for South Africa? We'll just look at some graphical. Next slide. Yeah, so with this slide, so basically I was trying to agree that the trend suggests that we are poised to reap the rewards of the knowledge economy. Why? Because of this trending trends list that I've mentioned here, that we're a younger population, and we're also urbanizing, and we have a small thriving ICT and high-tech market, as well as our expansion of our banking sector. So from the literature, these are the benefits that one could derive from, being a knowledge-based economy. From a foreign direct investment, you will see that if you tap into technology, R&D, ICT infrastructure, from an economic modeling perspective, for some of the studies that have been conducted, especially countries who are leading in that space, which is in terms of index, which is your Sweden, your Finland, your Netherlands. So those countries, actually, there are studies that have proved that actually once you fully transit to a knowledge-based economy, then your GDP will increase, your capita, as well as quality of life. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So with this one, colleague, we do not have any updated knowledge economy index. The only one that studies or researchers or economists have been referring to is the discontinued knowledge index, economy index that was done previously by the World Bank, basically looking at 4 pillars of knowledge economy. That's how the World Bank defines knowledge economies. One, looking at the institutional structures. Number two, looking at education and skills development, because you need an educated and a skilled population when we have to do with issues of human intelligence, or when we have to deal with issues of innovations and development. So you need a skilled labor force. The other one, its own information and communication infrastructure, which is your access and the use of ICT infrastructure. So I will just take you through, colleagues, because I wanted to see where we stand. So, but I realized this is a 2012 and it was discontinued, and that's the only available. But now I complemented that slide with the recent Global Innovation Index that shows some of the ranking of these variables. I'll just show you where we are, because before we exploit, we must know where we are and how we're doing as compared to our BRICS member states. So basically, when you look at the top 3 countries there, in terms of ranking, number 1 was Sweden, Finland, third was Denmark. Then when you look at our BRICS colleagues, you will see that Russia was the leading one, followed by Brazil at 60, South Africa was at 67, and China was 84, and India was at 109. Yes, but they were also, this assessment, they're subjective, and they're open for debate and so forth. One will argue why is China sitting there and so forth. But when you look, I'm going to show you the next slide where China, in terms of, no, can you go back? I want to show you something. Go back. Where China, if you look at the recent Global Innovation Index, is actually dominating the BRICS countries. So if you look at South Africa's score there, you'll see that we are lagging behind, and we need to fully explore this knowledge economy space. Yeah, it's fine. Next slide. So here, what I've gathered yesterday was that I had to look of what these countries have done, this knowledge-based economics, including one of our some of our BRICS member states, is that there is an enabling systematic sustained investment in knowledge-based economy. You'll see that Russia almost pumped in 2017, pumped close to 1.8 billions dollars in the a digital economy. That's a huge investment. And you could see that from the previous slides, that even the next slide that I'm going to show you, colleagues, that in terms of R&D, Russia is actually quite doing very well. And on the previous slide, we've seen that Russia, in terms of ICT index, was even beating China when you look at that World Bank index. We need also, so some of these countries, they've also orchestrated high value merchandise, goods and services, and there was a strong role of government in steering knowledge-based economies development. One exciting fact that I want to make, colleagues, is that the private sector in most of these leading knowledge-based economies follows the government to invest. So what happens is that the government is, in most of these countries, they open that conducive environment. Because if you see, one of the pillars is that you must have a strong regulatory and economic environment. So in that global index slide, I will show you how we are ranking in terms of that regard. And they've also removed constraint to innovation, and they've enabled a knowledge-based economies asset creation, and they've intensified their R&D. Next slide. Yeah, so this is a slide, colleagues, that I was referring to, that, for instance, if you look at ICT, if you look at ICT, you will see that ICT infrastructure indicator, this was the recent one that we're having, colleagues, the index. When you look at ICT infrastructure, look at access and use, and look at the overall ranking for South Africa. You could see that South Africa, India, South Africa, Brazil, we are all lagging behind when it comes to. But look at our leading economy, the China is ranked at 18, where you will see that most of this ICT network infrastructure are really dominating that space. Let me just quickly also look at the previous speaker mentioned that it is difficult
especially in the South African education system, for a grade 1 to go all the way to matric. This is evident in this case. Unfortunately, we didn't have figures for China. It was not reported, but we could see that in terms of overall education, we are ranked at number 69. China is at number 11. Look at our economy, it's almost similar to ours. Brazil is sitting at 68. So you could see that the trend is almost similar, where it's only Russia and China dominating, followed by India and some of the indexes. Next slide. But what I wanted to share mostly was that looking at the good success of ICT Russia competitive advantage was that as we mentioned, that government has been playing a greater role. The government tax incentives that they're implementing, they're really contributing to the success of the sector, and they've been localizing a lot of ICT infrastructure when it comes to because there's a clear shift toward middleware solutions such as integration, API gateways, microservice platforms. But the most one interesting, the one that I mentioned earlier on, that the $1.8 billion that really boosted the digital economy. So that's the question that I was also asking myself, that are we in that level where we can even pump such investment into the digital economy? Because if you look at our counterpart, they want to catch up with the global trade environment by making sure that they optimize the global digital economy. So this one, colleague, I think this is the last slide that I need to emphasize on in the next coming 2 minutes, then we're done. So here the question was that there was a short brief done by Investec. So there was an interesting question that I wanted to look at as well from an economics perspective, to find out whether is there a knowledge creation opportunity for the country. So if you look, for instance, the graph on my left-hand side, which is written SA growth in number of patents and GDP growth, 1992 to 2022. This chart, colleagues, does not suggest that innovation has a material impact on the performance of the South African economy. You could also see that there were several years with negative growth in patent, but still positive GDP growth. What does this mean, colleagues? Simply mean that the South African GDP growth is primarily driven by other factors, including global demands for commodities. The underpin of the SA economy is not innovation per se, yes, but it does contribute a lot. But innovation is nonetheless important for trend GDP, which implies that for the longer term outlook of the economy, innovation and education will become one of the most key contributing trend to our GDP. And it suggests that as well, that when you look at other countries that who have done exceptionally well on that regard, South Africa, South Korea, the US, and Australia, whereby they support the idea of greater innovation, which leads to better economic performance. Next slide. So here we're just acknowledging that, colleagues, that the first speaker mentioned that research is not just about only researchers who are publishing, but it should be people-centered. So you could see that the old model, the linear model of knowledge production, was that there will be, curiosity. It's a curiosity-driven research where researchers will just then investigate and then put publications, assuming that people will then, policymakers and government will just use that research. But now, if you look at the next slide, this is what the latest literature is proposing. Next slide. That we need a responsive model of knowledge production. What do you mean? It should start with societal challenges and ends with societal challenges. That's what these countries, colleagues, who are now leading as knowledge-based economies have done. So we could see that we have to just start with the society and end with the society, so that you can see the effect of that intervention. Next slide. Yeah, so this is what we've been emphasizing, colleagues, that these are key focus area to take advantage of the potential benefit of the knowledge-based economy. I think, colleagues, they've emphasized a lot on education and training, encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship, building a robust ICT infrastructure, making sure that we digitize, and we bring new technological frontiers into the economy. Lastly, we have policies that will make sure that we achieve the benefit of knowledge-based economy. Thank you very much.
You're getting
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Zwane. That was really quite enlightening. And I think what is important in what you indicated to us is that the knowledge economy must be harvested, and innovation would even be more crucial for future growth trajectories. South Africa, we are not fully exploiting our knowledge economy potential, and we need to explore this space better. However, you also indicated that there's important lessons that we can learn, and these lessons are quite pertinent to our efforts to improve our knowledge production and the contribution that the knowledge economy could do to our growth and development. Thank you so much, Mr. Zwane. Appreciate. Colleagues, I would like to open the floor for any questions. We've got a few minutes left. I'm not sure if there's anything on the chat. Mr. Mulala, is there anything on the chat?
Well, Prof, there's nothing on the chats. Thank you.
Right, colleagues, are there any questions, any comments? We have a few minutes. If you like to make a contribution to what was said today, it would be appreciated.
Prof, it doesn't seem to, there aren't any questions on the chat, and none,
Right.
no hands either.
Thank you. Thank you then very much, colleagues. I think we need to then move towards wrapping up this this event. I'm going to ask Dr. Lakela Kaunda to wrap up the event, and I won't speak to you again after that. But please permit me to firstly say thank you very much to the speakers for their incredibly valuable insights and to dealing with this issue. I think it's good for us to consider a number of pertinent issues around BRICS, but to do it as South Africans only and not within the wider context that we are so used to talking about BRICS. So we need to consider this, we need to consider our role in this. And then before I hand over to Dr. Lakela Kaunda, thank you so much to the colleagues, Mr. Mulala, Dr. Johnny Peterson, Ms. Nkate, as well as Ms. Kilson Field, and all the other colleagues that worked so hard and made this thing a success. But we know that's how you usually do it. Thank you very much, colleagues. And Dr. Kaunda then, thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And mine is an easy one to thank all the colleagues. It's been such a very informative and intellectually stimulating session. And it comes at the right time after the BRICS conference summit, rather, where it was decided that this BRICS family is expanding and it's becoming a much, much bigger family than it was. It became, therefore, very critical to say, how do we as South Africa embrace this new, bigger structure of BRICS? How do we fit in? Therefore, our presenters have been very good in dealing with that issue. with Dr. Maja in his opening remarks, reminding us of the purpose of this symposium, explaining this new term that we, as Dr. April was saying, we're all grappling with, pluriversalism. How do we embrace the new sources of knowledge and culture from all the sources and BRICS, the expanded BRICS, the current BRICS and BRICS Plus, so that we can use it as South Africa towards our main goal of building a better life, socio-economic development, which must lead us towards a more improved quality of life. Prof. Munyai raised something very important where he said, we should not be afraid, because it's easy for us to be afraid, as Dr. Macha was raising, that this is when we joined BRICS, for example, it was said, South Africa, you are punching above your weight, and it was only a small family of nations. Are we still punching above our weight, or are we just going to disappear completely? But this seminar is saying there's a lot of potential, there's a lot of knowledge, we must just harness it. There's more we can gain to build whether it's our manufacturing capacity or whatever, or social development, or whatever we plan to do to build our country to what we want it to be. The common theme has been investing in human capital development, using knowledge development, the knowledge we have towards that. How do we learn from India, from China, as Professor Ngawen was saying, and other colleagues? How do they learn from us, and how do we learn from them to achieve our goals? And Prof. Ngawen raising an important point, that if you have knowledge, use it to solve a particular problem. And that's what Mr. Zwane also told us when he was closing, and it was good that he was at the end, because he spoke about a responsive model of knowledge production, that there's a challenge, there's engagement, and then you respond. You consult, and then you respond to a challenge that you have in front of you, rather knowledge development for the sake of it. And there's also the issue of, which Prof. Munyai also raised, about us always wanting to be the best, behaving like the child in the classroom who doesn't want to be the naughty child in the class, that we should not want to be more Catholic than the Pope. Like, for example, on climate change, wanting to be quick, moving towards the greener route faster than the biggest polluters in the world, which is again another lesson that we have learned. And also the issue of how do we then make this network of BRICS, this forum of BRICS, how do we make the knowledge that we gain them more accessible? Dr. April raised the issue of the BRICS Forum becoming a bit elitist, that they mentioned the network of BRICS universities, academic forums, the BRICS think tank, etc., that the knowledge production becomes very elitist and it leaves out many. For example, our hundreds of matriculants, those who matriculate, if they don't go to university, they disappear. So there, an importance of skills development. How do we skill them so that they contribute towards economic development and a better life? Making, therefore, the call to make the BRICS education agenda more and more inclusive towards socio-economic development. So that has been very effective, very informative, as was the input by Dr. Silimatsela as well as Mr. Matizerova on one, investment in knowledge and development and knowledge production, how it is important. Prof. Silimatsela raising the question of how then do we organize, for example, our knowledge practitioners so that they can support the knowledge economy? How do we capture all our communication and the value of data-driven practices so that they help us to achieve our socio-economic development goal? And then that important point of access to knowledge and those knowledge portals, the open sex, and that we must have access to the information and all the information repositories within the BRICS countries. That producing knowledge on its own is meaningless if your knowledge economy cannot access that knowledge for development. So that I found to be very, very helpful. And then Mr. Zwane reminding us the important point that whether South Africa is ready for the knowledge economy, and the terrible statistics that we are lagging behind at 67 as with India and Brazil, but there being opportunities, that it's something we need to bear in mind, but that we should not just remain where we are, because there's a lot of opportunities and a lot that we need to do in and mentioning the investments in education, training and development, entrepreneurship, ICT infrastructure, new economy, etc. So the outcome is that this pluriversalism, the embracing and harvesting of knowledge within the BRICS family, there's a lot for us to learn, there's a lot for us to gain, and using our knowledge production and knowledge economy, we can take our country further. So it's to thank everyone for participating in this session. It wouldn't be anything without all the participants and also all the panelists. We know everyone is very busy, but they took time to join us to discuss this important forum, which takes place, as said, as we prepare towards a bigger BRICS family, and saying how do we then as South Africa prepare ourselves, and as knowledge and knowledge practitioners, how do you assist the country in harvesting knowledge from the BRICS family, building that pluriversalist culture, and moving obviously towards the ultimate goal, which is building that united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous South Africa that we were promised by Madiba in 1994. With those words, on behalf of the National School of Government, the principal, Prof. Ngaweni, and Prof. Tian Potgieter, who is the host today, Dr. Macha, and all the colleagues at the NSG, thank you very much, everyone, for participating, and thank you to you, Ms. Coulsons-Field, for assisting us with the logistics of putting this together. Thank you very much. I think we are adjourned.
Thank you.
This is who we are. More than 60 million different voices echoing in harmony from the southernmost part of the continent, where ordinary people have carved their names in an extraordinary history by showing the world that peace is always better than war. Our reach is not limited by our borders, bringing joy in people's hearts and a spark of rhythm to their moves. This is the welcome home of opportunity, inspiring millions to look here in search of a better life, and sharing our best with the world. We are home to undulating mountains, flowers, endless seas, the beautiful animal kingdom, and the ever-changing seasons that color our world. We are the birthplace of humanity and a showcase of human excellence. We believe in South Africa. We are inspired by our victories of the past and our strong institutions to overcome the challenges of today and build a better tomorrow. This is who we are, South African. South Africa, inspiring new ways.
This is a message by Brand South Africa.